Skeptical Veteran here, and let's take a look at what caused the breakdown with Zelensky and Trump and Vance in the White House the other day. Um, to put it mildly, you could call it a case of emotional manipulation, coercion. Uh, you could see it even perhaps as a case of being trolled by the U.S. government. Because let's take a closer look at what Trump has had to say about Zelensky in the past and even recently. I mean, here we have him calling him a modestly successful comedian and talking about how he conned us out of $350 billion, $200 billion more than Europe. And then he talks about how Zelensky wants to keep this gravy train going, using these numbers that just are astounding. I mean, $350 billion is frightening. How could we have spent that much money on supporting Ukraine? Well, we didn't. As of April of last year, we've spent $174 billion. And guess what? That $174 billion also included money to replenish the stocks for weapons that we sent them. So this isn't even necessarily us sending them a big bag of cash of $174 billion. This is just us sending them weapons and then setting up the infrastructure to replace the weapons that we sent them, most of which were older and needed to be replaced anyway. So here we see $26 billion of supplemental spending that was in the money sent to Ukraine for the purpose of replenishing weapons that we've sent them. So this is money that's going back into our own economy. This is $26 billion we are spending on our factories, our workers, our infrastructure to rebuild. So this isn't $26 billion that went to Ukraine. It was $26 billion that came back to us. It can be argued, yes, that the money was replenishing supplies that we sent them that were worth that. But it still doesn't negate the fact that the money is basically doing a round robin. It's going to Ukraine in the sense of us sending them weapons, and then it's coming back to us in the fact that we're building new weapons to replace those. So then you have to look at what is the attitude, what is the air that we are telling Zelensky and the Ukrainian people that the U.S. is going to continue to support them in this war. And you have Donald Trump come along and start to talk about how he needs to negotiate a end of the war quickly or else he's not going to have a country, which is not necessarily not true. But this is also the same article where Trump again starts talking about how he's a dictator and he won't have elections. Well, Mr. President, the Ukrainian Constitution says that at a time of war, they go into martial law, especially war on their homeland. They're in martial law right now, which means their constitutional rights are limited, much as ours would be. If we had a ground invasion war that was actually taking ground and effectively keeping us on our toes in the continental United States, we would not be having elections either. I can practically guarantee it. I'm not familiar with that part of the Constitution, or not with the Constitution, but with the Special Powers Act and the Declaration of Executive powers. When the NDAA, the National Defense Authority, was enacted, it set precedents where the President of the United States can suspend Congress if there's an act of war. They can suspend the Senate. Basically, the President can take complete and total control during a crisis, which is how you would actually kind of want things to go, ostensibly. Because if you're in the middle of fighting a war where you have ground forces advancing on your national capital, you don't want to sit there and be worrying about trying to get ballots sent out to people to have them go vote about what the leadership is going to do. Now, and realistically, that is a attack against democracy and the rule of law, but that's what martial law does. That's why martial law needs to be avoided as much as humanly possible. It's why we have things like posse comitatus, which say that the president cannot call up U.S. forces on American soil unless there's a cause. So, and then look at what happened with 2014. Russia basically stole Crimea through a fake election, and that wasn't even while guns were being fired. So yes, the notion of having an election for a new leader during a time of war in your country is a bit of a stretch. So how are we going to negotiate this? We need to get Russia to stop fighting. And to do that, the U.S. decides to engage with Russia, excluding Kiev, leaving Ukraine out of the discussion. We are talking about your country, about ending the war that is killing your people, but we are not going to have you come to the table to talk. How is that even remotely a good idea? And I mean, even Zelensky says excluding Ukraine from U.S.-Russia talks is very dangerous. And it is, because it excludes the people that need to have their voice heard. We're talking about a war where people are dying, a country is being invaded and annexed, and we're not going to let that country come to the table with the discussions about what is and is not acceptable. But then things get even worse, because we have the U.S. siding with Russia, declaring that Russia is not the aggressor, that Russia should not be condemned, that this should not be seen as a negative thing against Russia. And here's a close-up of that article where the U.S. opposed a European drafted resolution condemning Moscow's actions and supporting Ukraine's territorial integrity, voting the same way that Russia, North Korea, and Belarus did. Now, think about that. We're sitting here telling Ukraine, we're telling Vladimir Zelensky that we have your interest at heart. We want to protect Ukrainian sovereignty and Ukrainian lives. And we're going to do that by voting against you. We are siding with North Korea and Russia. And then we decided to draft and vote a resolution which doesn't condemn Russia, has no criticism of Russia in this. We're saying that, again, Russia is blameless, that Ukraine is at fault for this. So how is that supposed to fill Zelensky with the sense of the U.S. has Ukraine at their hearts of these discussions? And I mean, it even gets better. When you think it can't get any worse, Europe is to be excluded from the Russian-Ukraine peace talks. So we talk about how we cannot be bothered to be Ukraine's guardians, that we have to pull back. We can't afford to keep just sending you supplies. So what would that imply? Well, okay, Europe needs to pick up some of the slack, which, by the way, the U.S. is, I think, number 4 in contributors of support to the Ukraine war, just to make that clear. There's a list, I can't remember where we are exactly, but I know that we are either number 3 or 4 on the list of people that have given to Ukraine to defend them against Russia. And now we're taking the position of we're going to exclude Europe from the talk. So it's no longer even the U.S. and Europe making a plan for how we're going to provide security and infrastructure to Ukraine to keep Russia from doing this again. No, it is literally just the U.S. talking to Russia, and no talks about security forces or security considerations. Now then, if you look at that video with Zelensky and Vance and Trump talking, one of the things that Zelensky keeps going back to is security assurances. And then Trump even begins to kind of downplay it like, well, we're not there yet because we don't have people there, which is really saying the security considerations aren't about security considerations for Ukraine and preventing Russia from invading again just another year down the road or a week down the road. To Trump, security considerations is securing the U.S. efforts and assets in Ukraine trying to mine these rare earth minerals. That's not what Zelensky is there to sign a deal for. Zelensky is there to sign a deal saying you can have access or we will split our minerals resources with you for assurances that you will prevent Russia from doing this again. That is what Zelensky is there to sign a deal for. Then Vance comes along and starts saying, well, you know what, you had an opportunity. You should have used diplomacy. They have used diplomacy. They had an accord and a deal basically that we will split natural resources with Russia in an effort to prevent them from invading and doing more of what they did with Crimea. And they've tried to set a number of ceasefires with Russia in the process of this war. And every time Russia just violates the ceasefire, they just say, you know what, we don't care. We're going to do our own thing and we're going to take Ukraine. We don't want mineral deals. We don't want an accord and some of your land. We want Ukraine. That is what's on the table. And as I've seen a meme in the past say, that it's very simple. If Russia were to stop firing their weapons, the war in Ukraine would be over. If Ukraine stops firing their weapons, Ukraine will be gone. And that is what Zelensky is faced with, is total annihilation of his country. Thousands of civilians dying, thousands of soldiers dying, and then Vance comes along and starts accusing him of not wanting to end the war. That then they start going off on, well, you know, you're going to have a hard time getting soldiers. Your soldiers are going to start abandoning, and you're going to start to suffer. You're going to have to force people at gunpoint to go to the front lines. And these are all like very personal attacks on Ukraine's sovereignty and on Zelensky and his leadership. And yeah, he got pissed off. I would get pissed off. I was pissed off, and I'm not even Ukrainian, and I'm watching it going, how dare you? How dare you sit here and then talk about how, well, you know, both sides are losing a lot of soldiers. Russian soldiers are dying. Russian families are being torn apart by your war. You started this war. You are harming these Russian families and these Russian kids going to fight. And you're going to have to start doing the same thing of forcing your Ukrainian children to go and fight. And the entire debacle was an emotional attack and a emotional manipulation of Vladimir Zelensky, the Ukrainian people, and of the American support for preventing, or not preventing, but ending this war. Instead of us saying, you know, we have the Budapest Memorandum that we signed with Ukraine saying that we do not want you to have nuclear weapons. So we will defend you and we will help you if Russia invades. And now we're saying, well, you know what? It's not our problem. We need to back off because we've spent $350 billion, which is, I still want to know where that number came from because we haven't spent that. We've spent just barely over half of that. And again, a lot of that money is money that's going back into our economy, going back into employing our people to manufacture these weapons. So this is just heartbreaking and absurd that we are using the tragedy in Ukraine to again create more division, more examples of how we can't even get along with ourselves. And yet we're going to tell Ukraine that we are going to get the best deal for them by excluding everybody else. Nobody can be a part of this. Europe can kick rocks, even though they're the ones that actually have even more of a stake in this than we do. Because let's be honest, Russia takes Ukraine. Let's say Ukraine falls completely. That does really nothing to America directly. It, however, it does set up a contingent of, now Russia has successfully overthrown another sovereignty. Who's next? Who in the Balkans can sleep at night knowing that the United States and NATO just sat back and watched Russia overthrow a sovereign country? And where does it end? After they take Ukraine, they take more of the Balkans. Then after that, do they decide, you know what, screw it, we're going to go ahead and push the envelope, and we're going to try Poland, Finland, Sweden? How can we look at what's happening in the world and sit there and say that, well, you know, it's not our problem. It may not be your problem today, but it sure as hell is going to be your problem tomorrow. And by siding with Russia and North Korea, what kind of a message are we sending? I mean, at any degree, any level, how do you side with North Korea and Russia? And I mean, Belarus, with the things that are going on there, and the corruption. It's terrifying, and it's just, I'm at a loss for words. Please, somebody give me some more words. Give me words of either, yes, you know, this is not right. You can still want Trump to be a great president. You can still say, you know what, Trump's efforts everywhere else in Doge and ending ending vaccinations for measles, and saying, you know what, influenza is going to just massacre massive portions of our population. We don't care. We're fine with that. But how do you not sit here and look at him siding with North Korea and say, you're wrong, Mr. President. You're siding with Russia. You are wrong, Mr. President. That is not a bad thing to say. That does not make you not a patriot. That does not make you hate your country. That makes you hold your politicians accountable. Mr. President, you can do better. We can do better. We need to do better. So, please, give me comments in the video, send me an email, and I do my best to respond to all the comments I can. I ask, please like and subscribe if you can, because I'm hoping that I can try to build an audience and build a network here, that we can keep these discussions moving, that we can talk about these things and realize that there are middle grounds. You can still support your president and tell him he's wrong about something. You can still support your country and want to support another country in their effort to remain a country and not be massacred. So please, give me some responses. Maybe we can shoot another video, do a live stream, or I can just reply in the text like I have in some other videos. And as always, you take care of yourselves, take care of each other, try to stay sane, and hold us to a higher standard. America is a fantastic, a phenomenal nation, and we have so much greatness. But right now we are squandering it, and we are ignoring it, and that is sad, and that is wrong. That is heartbreaking, especially as a veteran that has served this great nation, to see what we have done and what we have become. It makes me want to cry. So, take care.